SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Have you been seriously injured? Mama Justice is here for you. Our medical team partners with top-notch doctors, surgeons, therapists, and urologists, ensuring a comprehensive recovery journey. If you've been injured, call Mama Justice today. We're here for you.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this Hump Day. All right, welcome aboard, everyone. Overnight, the United States House of Representatives, they passed a budget resolution. Now, just so you'll know, this isn't like a bill. It's just a resolve, if you will. This is what we're going to do, kind of laying out a roadmap for such legislation. It instructs House committees to craft the various policy that will end up in what will be a massive reconciliation package, and that'll head on over to the Senate. I wonder, Rhino, if they employ the same sort of procession to transmit.
Oh, they got a lot more money. They don't have the inflatable T-Rex suits. Theirs look more like the Lion King on Broadway.
Oh, man. So, the House resolution would call for sweeping tax cuts. And the way they do this, to try to keep it within those reconciliation rules, something I know we've talked about extensively on the program, and just a reminder, that simply means that if a measure is approved by the Senate parliamentarian over there based on Senate rules that, yep, this can pass with a simple majority, then it's considered passing through reconciliation. That's the way it's described. If not, if the parliamentarian says, nope, this doesn't meet the criteria, then you got to have the old 60 votes. Not likely, especially, Rhino, since the vote tally in the U.S. House last night was ever so close, 217 to 215. Now, I believe there was one member who, on the Republican side, that voted against the bill. That would be Representative Thomas Massey of the great state of Kentucky, or is it a Commonwealth? And he just said, well, we're cutting taxes. We're not cutting spending enough. This thing is going to continue to increase our deficits and debt. Therefore, I'm a nay. He's right, actually, because it does include instructions for a $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. Well, that indicates the expectation of the U.S. House that the $2 trillion per year deficits shall ensue. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said this is the first important step in opening up the reconciliation process. So there you go. We just did a resolution. Here's the roadmap. Here are the instructions. Go away, committees, and come back with something we can assemble into legislation. He kept the floor open for an hour. And then he opted to punt the blueprint when it appeared the opposition wouldn't budge, but they opened up the vote again, and it turns out many who left the chamber came back in and voted in favor. 2 Republican reps who, before the vote, had indicated they were nays. And by the way, that could have really been bad because it means the legislation wouldn't have passed. That's Tim Burchett of the great state of Tennessee and Victoria Sparks of Indiana. They publicly said, we don't know about this deal. But ultimately, they voted for it. And so the measure passes. They both flipped in a matter of minutes. Mr. Massey, on the other hand, said the budget's going to add to the nation's staggering $36 trillion of debt. I am therefore a nay. So this is where it really gets kind of fun, I guess, if you could call it that, is how they're going to implement and design a tax cut package or the tax cut aspect of the total package to fit in that $4.5 trillion mark. Why is that important? Because you guys know that the president has said that he wants to see the exemption of overtime and tips and Social Security for income tax purposes, and then also wants to increase the so-called SALT cap. Well, here's the problem with that, the state and local tax deduction, is that if you do that and you don't cut spending elsewhere and you also want to keep the existing Trump tax cuts in place, the numbers don't work. Now you can't get it through reconciliation, meaning you got to eliminate some of the other tax cuts elsewhere or come up with more spending cuts. One of the things that's concerning to state governments is the instructions to go out and cut potentially $880 billion over 10 years out of the Medicaid program. And man, the Democrats, you've seen it, Rhino, they are absolutely jumping all over that. Oh, my gosh, you're pushing Granny over the cliff, and children are dying in the streets. Oh, the clutching of pearls and gnashing of teeth that they are so well known for. But there's plenty of waste, fraud, and abuse. I would argue about that much per year. If you break that over 10 years, about $80 billion a year. Heck, the GAO said as much 3 years ago. General Accounting Office said, yeah, we think there's about $80 billion. And that's after doing a Doge-type investigation. So this is nothing new. It's not like we didn't know this. And if you go look at spending on Medicaid, both at the federal and the state level, you don't have to go too far back to find that it was about half what it is now. The state level, $950 million. Wasn't too long ago. It was around $500 million. At the federal level, it's currently $616 billion. Wasn't too long ago. You find it about $500. So I think there's plenty of room to cut there. I still favor, actually, even if it means cutting federal money that flows down to the state level, and let states figure it out and have more latitude in designing their Medicaid program. So they are looking to cut $829 billion total out of discretionary spending. That's defense and all the rest of the government agency complex, which is gigantic. But it does have an increase in the debt ceiling of $4 trillion, $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, and then savings on the mandatory side, mainly coming in the form of rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. Veterans benefits are also on the chopping block because there's lots of waste, fraud, and abuse in that program as well. It, however, does provide an increase in spending for the border and defense. So it's a bit of conflicting reports coming out of Washington. This is exactly what the Senate did last week, except it had no tax cuts. It did pass a measure that increases spending on defense and immigration, which is also discretionary spending, border security. Man, this is fun, watching all this sausage being made up there. I'm shocked, honestly, that the House was able to get this done, because there were a lot of members of the House that had various requirements, if you will, that they had announced that were not included in here, such as lifting the SALT cap. However, it's still on the table because the instructions are, look, go figure out tax cuts Okay? You got $4.5 trillion to work with over 10 years. So, again, just depends on what that final bill looks like. Now, here's the sort of the inverse of what the Democrats are grousing about today, moaning about, with all the cuts to Medicaid and all that other stuff. You could also argue that every single one of them who did, in fact, every single one voted against this measure, they voted for tax increases on the middle class. That's what they will not acknowledge. They won't do it. They are convinced that everything that came out of the Trump tax cuts, all the tax benefits there, all went to the billionaires. They're wrong about that. And that has been investigated, analyzed, disproven, debunked a gazillion times. And for the purposes of just doing a comparison, you guys could go do your own math, or you can send me your data. I'll plug it in and tell you, hey, this is what it would be like if these tax cuts expired. This is what it would be like if they stayed in place, what your net pay, your disposable income after taxes would look like. They just don't actually acknowledge that. So Thomas says that Thomas Massey's the only conservative. He voted for tax increases, Thomas. Think about that, for tax increases. Please tell me you don't think that's conservative. Scott Sands, national radio host, is next.
From the SubaruPaint.com Weather Center, I'm Bob Sullender. For all your paint and coating needs, go to SubaruPaint.com. Today's sunny conditions, high near 77. Tonight, increasing clouds, low around 53. Your Thursday, beautiful day, partly sunny, high near 67. Thursday evening, mostly clear, low around 41. And for your finally Friday, sunny skies, high near 70 degrees. This weather brought to you by our friends at Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile in downtown Bolton. Shop local. Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile, your building supply expert since 1871. This is Bob, and if you're like me, you like dealing with local people. Majestic Metals was founded in Mississippi in 1954 and are headquartered right in Gluckstadt. For complete metal building systems and steel roofing and siding, call the hometown folks. Majestic Metals, 800-647-8540 or online at majesticmetalsinc.com.
Family Termite is a proud VIP sponsor of the Handyman Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Whether you're a proud DIYer or a seasoned veteran, Mississippi's handyman Buddy Slowick has the answers to your home improvement questions each Saturday from 10 till noon.
This is Home Answers Radio, and my guest today is Trey Jackson of Bulldog Construction. Trey, if a business has uneven sidewalks, they're asking for trouble. Would you agree?
Lynn, they are. It's a trip hazard and it needs to be fixed. Our foam technology can level those uneven walks without having to lay down any new concrete. Much easier and more affordable.
Trey, my wife tripped over one of those and skinned her knee up.
She was fortunate. Call Bulldog Construction at 601-853-4242.
Pure Air Consultants has always been your go-to for reliable and affordable heating and cooling systems, and now we're offering an additional product to avoid the 25 to 30% increase that everyone is talking about. With Day and Night, a Carrier family product, your professionals at Pure Air Consultants can install a reliable heating and cooling system with a 10-year system warranty. Pure Air Consultants and Day and Night, providing ultimate comfort for your home for an affordable price. Call us today for your free quote, 601-939-7420. That's 601-939-7420, or find us online at mypureairconsultants.com.
This is where the story of your state gets told each day. We're proud to cover the Magnolia State like nobody else. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. We're waiting for Scott Sands, trying to get connected up with him. As soon as we do, we'll bring him in. In the meantime, on the C Spire text line, Ben from Madison. I know it's important to get the tax cuts extended, but we have to get spending in order. I have a hard time understanding how they are going to cut spending on Medicaid, yet still increase overall spending. Am I missing something here? Well, sort of, Ben. It's a $7.3 trillion budget. Medicaid is a big program. It's $616 billion. So cutting Medicaid spending, it certainly helps. And we talk about this all the time. And I think some people get the wrong impression that I'm not for spending when it doesn't amount to a lot. No, I'm simply saying you're not done. It's like operating your household on an overdrawn basis every single month. You spend more money than you take in, so you cut a little bit, and that's great, but you're still overdrawn. You still can't make it. Still got to borrow money or find some other source of funds to exist. And that's exactly what happens in our government. I think there's too much celebration on what amounts to very small amounts of money. That's great. Okay, next one. Think about sporting competition. Football, usually. You have a football schedule. Games are a week apart. Baseball is one that you're playing almost every day. And baseball players have learned this, that, man, as soon as that at-bat is over and you failed, you got to flush it. You got to move on to the next one. And if you succeeded, okay, you got a next one coming up. That lasts about 10 minutes. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point, is that it's a giant budget. And, okay, we got Scott Sands joining us now. Hey, Scott.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Hey, Gerard, it's great to be back on with you.
Good to have you. Absolutely. So, Rhino, we got some sound here we want to play?
Donald Trump is reviving our conviction in America. We need a leader here back home who revives our conviction in Ohio. Donald Trump has a vision for America. We need a leader here at home who has a vision for Ohio. And that is why last night I declared my candidacy to become the next governor of a great state at the heart of the greatest nation known to mankind. The state where I was born and raised. The state where I'm raising my two sons today. A state whose best days are still ahead. I am proud to announce again my candidacy to be the next governor of the great state of Ohio. Thank you.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
So that was last night in Toledo.
Yeah.
Vivek Ramaswamy, yeah.
You got everybody fired up. So, Scott, just share a little anecdotal background. I got interested in following Vivek, honestly, back in the 2019 or so time frame. He, as you know, very successful entrepreneurial career, and became a guest rather frequently in the business media. In particular, Fox Business would have him on quite a bit. I always enjoyed his interview and was always so impressed. And then George Floyd situation happened in June 2020. And subsequent to that, as you know, virtually every major corporation in America spun up these DEI departments and mandatory CRT training and all sorts of changes in policy to give preferential treatment. You remember all that. Still going on to some extent. But a lot of it's been rolled back. He wrote a book called Woke Inc. I got it. I read it. And it was spot on. And it exposed all of that nonsense in the corporate community. And after that, I said to myself, and I started telling my friends around here, watch this guy. He's probably going to be a candidate for president. And, of course, you know the reaction. Who? How do you say his name? And here we are. I think he'd be a fabulous governor for the great state of Ohio. He's so articulate, does such a great job of just distilling down what are just common sense issues into common sense talk and messaging, just as he did right there. What do you think?
I certainly agree. He's a rising star in the conservative movement. I think he's got, or had anyway, some name recognition issues, but he is an amazing speaker, very articulate. I watched his first announcement on Monday night and then attended the rally last night in Toledo. And he has delivered in the last 2 days 4 hour-long, close to 90-minute speeches without notes, without a teleprompter. And the two rallies, the two speeches that I watched, were two completely separate events, two completely separate speeches. And he certainly has a way of articulating the conservative message today. And I think that he's got a lot of momentum right now in the state of Ohio. Apologies, I apparently forgot to turn my computer sounds off, so a little beeping in the background. So I think the momentum he's got right now, especially with the endorsements Monday night of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, which he spoke about last night, if you have that clip.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the endorsement of President Trump last night. Came in right after we launched the campaign, and we are taking the country and this state to the next level. How about that? America's back, and it feels fantastic, all right? But we still have our work cut out ahead of us. In fact, we're just getting started. This is the celebration of the beginning. It's just the very end of the beginning. That's what this is.
That's awesome. And that's the kind of messaging that he's really good at crafting, Scott, that resonates with people. It really does. And I applaud him. Go ahead.
He was able to hit on a number of hot topic issues last night, from DEI to bringing innovation and technology to the state of Ohio. And this race has changed dramatically. Attorney General, who has been a terrific AG for the state of Ohio, Dave Yost, announced his candidacy before Vivek, while Vivek was still with Doge, and was presumed to be the front runner in the gubernatorial race in Ohio, since John Husted was named to replace J.D. Vance in the U.S. Senate. All the speculation had been Husted wanted to be governor, which is why he stepped out of the gubernatorial race 6 years ago, to serve as LG for Mike DeWine. And Yost kind of filled that vacuum, and now with Vivek in the race, he is blowing Dave Yost out of the water in the Republican primary. The interesting thing about this, though, Gerard, is that in the latest polling that I saw this morning, the only Democrat candidate in the race so far, Dr. Amy Acton, now leads Vivek by just over 1 percentage point in the state. And she's an interesting candidate because she was the health director for Republican Governor Mike DeWine during the pandemic, responsible for shutting down so many small businesses in the state, and has no political experience whatsoever. I think these numbers are obviously going to change. We're 2 years out from the election, and I'm sure there will be another Democrat candidate to step in. Speculation about former Senator Sherrod Brown, perhaps former Congressman Tim Ryan, some other names that may fill the vacuum as well. But for her to have an early lead over Vivek is quite interesting. Yeah, it is. Contrast Vivek to Governor DeWine. I'm not a big fan of the governors. So I like Mike personally. He's become a friend over the years. He is, in my opinion, Ohio's grandfather. I think he is a very compassionate man, cares about the people of Ohio, has been a good steward for the state, I believe. I've certainly not agreed with him on everything, and many people in the state and probably across the country would consider him to be in the rhino vein of the Republican Party. But I think he's been overall a good governor, but he is certainly not the conservative with a backbone that I think our state needs to enact change in the state. And again, the political intrigue, Governor DeWine, who served as Attorney General, he's been in Congress. He's a smart cookie when it comes to being a political operative. And recently, to replace John Husted, he named Jim Tressel as lieutenant governor. Right. And, of course, everybody in the state and maybe down in SEC country knows Tressel is the former coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. He led Youngstown State University as president, and not a politician either. I think that appointment was made because DeWine wants to protect his legacy and not have everything that he's done erased by Vivek Ramaswamy, and he tried to find somebody with the name recognition and the popularity in the state of Ohio who could possibly beat Vivek if Tressel decides to enter the gubernatorial primary himself.
Yeah, I was a little stunned at that appointment, frankly. Scott, we're up against a break right here. We're going to get you after the break to continue this discussion. We're enjoying it. I know we got some more sound we want to play. Especially want to talk about a statement that was included in Vivek's speech. I think all of them is his focus on education freedom and school choice. He's a big proponent of that. That's something we're struggling to get past here in the great state of Mississippi. I think you got some sound for us on that. We're coming right back with Scott Sands, national radio host. Stay with us.
Touch me, baby, tainted love. Touch me, baby, tainted love. Tainted love.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Turn my back to the wind. Catch my breath before I start off again. Living on without a moment to spend. Pass an evening with a drink and a friend. I let my skin get too thin.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Our guest is Scott Sands, national radio host. So, Scott, before we went to break, we were talking about this issue of school choice, education freedom, something that many states have adopted across the country. Nearby Ohio there, universal school choice. By Governor Kim Reynolds. She was a big proponent of that. Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas made it a priority right after she was elected. Got universal choice enacted. They're in the final 3 phases of that right now. And the president fully supports it, as does his Secretary of Education. But we have trouble getting that through in Mississippi. Now, you have some sound for us, I believe. You want to introduce that?
Sure, and I realize HB 1433 is under consideration in Mississippi right now, and it only makes sense for the state to move in that direction. You're surrounded with Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, all have school choice programs. I think I'm filling in for you on Friday, actually, and
yes,
to dive into the issue a little bit more. But we had a chance to ask Vivek. He spent a lot of time during his rally last night talking about improving the education system in Ohio with everything from minor steps like banning cell phones from schools and reenacting the president's physical fitness program to school choice options. And I asked him about that after the rally last night.
What we have to do is give every parent the opportunity to seek the best possible education for their kids, wherever that may be. Public school, charter school, or homeschooling. I'm also focused on making sure that our public schools are actually equipped to compete with the best of the alternatives. Meaning merit-based pay. Pay public school teachers and principals and administrators and superintendents according to the results they deliver.
Yeah.
It only makes sense. Our tax money funds education, so why shouldn't we as parents decide where that money is best used?
Totally agree. Now, just to kind of catch you up there, Senate Bill 1433 unfortunately died on the calendar. And that was legislation introduced by Representative Rob Robertson, the Education Committee chairman in the House, that would have allowed a public-to-public option as well as a public-to-private. But unfortunately, we couldn't even get that through our House. So what we're left with is a bill that was introduced by Representative Jansen Owen. In fact, he's coming on the show at 11:05 today. That is House Bill 1435, which would allow essentially unrestricted open enrollment, public-to-public transfer. And then we have another one that's still alive, came out of the House, 1432, which would expand the districts in which charter schools could locate in the state of Mississippi. Currently, that's limited to only D and F districts. And I've said on this show, Scott, that I'm a little skeptical of the district grading system in our state. We only have 3 D and F districts in our state. Now, I know we made a lot of progress from an education perspective, and the governor is rightfully touted that. I'm not sure I'm buying that we only have 3 D and F districts, and that's the only place a charter school can go now.
Well, I was educated at a high school in Mississippi, and it was a Catholic high school, so I think I got a pretty good education, but I certainly can relate.
Yeah, I was too. I went to high school at St. Joseph here locally in central Mississippi, parochial education as well, but we kind of fashion ourselves as a conservative state. Education choice is a very conservative idea, but yet we struggle. We've been working on this for years, and we have a little bit of school choice. Children with dyslexia, special needs have got some options, though we don't fully fund that. It has to be separately funded the way our system works. So we have a waiting list. So we can't get that cleared up, and we can't locate charter schools. We have 10. We thought we'd have 75 or 80 by now. We have 10, and we're only limited to 3 districts. There's a lot of pushback on it. Scott, you got any thoughts or ideas about that?
I wish I had ideas. I wish I had solutions, but I think that beginning to look at what the Department of Education does on a national level is a good start, and figuring out how some of that money may be better spent. As Vivek said last night, he's not looking to pick fights with school districts or teachers' unions. He wants to find the solutions, and I think we could do that on a state-by-state level because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for states.
How about the idea of merit pay, bonus pay for good education outcomes or good performance in the classroom? Man, that's what we do in the private sector. Why can't we do that in government?
Right. I think that's a great concept. I don't know how it works in practice. Are you looking at students' test scores to make sure that there are improvements? Are you looking at an overall class that a teacher has or an overall school performance? And will that mean that the better teachers wind up migrating to the schools that have better performance levels overall and historically? I think there's a lot of merit to the concept of merit-based pay. I don't know exactly how that works.
And there's been some other implementations of that, and I think we got enough smart, creative people we could figure that out. But I'll give you just one idea and get your thoughts on it. What if we implemented universal school choice? You can go anywhere you want. No questions asked. Money follows the child. And we compensate the teachers and the administrators in a school based on retention. You're doing a good job if they're not wanting to get out of your school.
I love that. And maybe we can find some NIL money for the higher performing students as well.
I think we can get creative. I really do. I actually think we could raise private money to fund, to some extent, these bonuses, this variable pay. I think there's an interest in that among the private sector for our citizens to receive a good quality education.
I think the number I've heard is about $7,000 per student in Mississippi.
That's right.
And I think those numbers can go up if the national money and maybe even some of the state money is reallocated.
I totally agree. And we know from audits that in our state we have an excess amount of money going to the back office and not to the classroom, which is a problem. There's a lot of protectionism, as you well know, that exists in the education community, maybe more so than in the political world, honestly. And that's alive and well here. We have 141 districts. We have 82 counties. And there was some talk about consolidating school districts and forcing that down to one per county. Man, that got lots of backlash, so they decided just to study it, which normally doesn't produce a lot of results. But that's kind of where we are on that. I think we could get creative here. I really do, and it's just been a source of frustration. Something else we've tried to get going in Mississippi, restored, is the ballot initiative process. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the background there. We had one. It would allow citizens to place a measure on the ballot through the mechanics as prescribed by the Constitution. Would amend our Constitution. We had such a measure about 5 years ago. It passed, but then one of our mayors sued. It was for medical marijuana program. and sued on the basis that, unfortunately, in our Constitution, it says that you have to have a kind of an equally distributed signature count from across 5 congressional districts. I actually had 5 explicit in the Constitution. We ain't got before. So they didn't accommodate, when that amendment was passed, the possibility we may have a change in the number of districts. And so for the last 4 years, at least the House has earnestly tried to restore it. Can't get any traction. Here we are. We don't have one. What do you think about that? Just the ballot initiative in general.
So the state of Ohio actually just went through a similar debate 2 years ago. It was issue 1. Which the state constitution here in Ohio is, in my opinion, far too easy to amend, which creates issues if there are regulatory problems in the amendment process. The legislature is kind of hamstrung on being able to make any adjustments.
Sure,
that issue failed. There was a lot of outside money coming into the state to pitch the idea. It did fail. Some confusion with voters around that, but that's exactly how the marijuana initiative passed in Ohio. It was initially an amendment that failed, a horrible amendment, but now we have legalized marijuana in the state of Ohio through a ballot initiative.
Well, and what's been offered that I think there is agreement on is that to change our process from one that would amend the Constitution to one that would allow amendment or creation of statute. That requires amending the Constitution to allow that, of course, and that's what's been discussed. And it hasn't seemed to be a big priority this year, I would argue. I think people, after the attempts the last couple of years, kind of gave up on it and moved on to something else. Of course, now we're focused more on tax reform in the state. That's probably the highest profile issue as well. Mobile sports betting, something else we're trying to get passed. I'm not sure, Rhino, if you saw this. The House passed a measure last night that would increase casino taxes, gaming taxes, as an attempt to get the Senate to act on the mobile sports betting bill. So we got some political gamesmanship. I'm sure you'll dig into that on Friday. Any parting words? Got about 20 seconds left.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gerard. I look forward to talking with everybody in Rhino on Friday as well.
Sounds great. Scott Sands, national radio host. Appreciate him joining us. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Since 19
Days with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Welcome back, everyone. Just wanted to catch you up with what's going on in Washington. The president is now conducting his first cabinet meeting. That's being carried live. And Elon Musk is currently addressing the assembly. I can see Rhino in the background.
That's going to make some people's heads explode.
And he's in his black MAGA garb there. I see the vice president in the background.
What about decorum and norms?
I see Stephen Miller, of course, with the president's staff. Scott Hazant. Kevin, who's his economic advisor. I can't make out who the person is next to him. But nonetheless, it's all the brain trust, the cabinet members, the inside circle staff. So back to what we were talking about before we went to interview Scott Sands, who was great. And he will be filling in for me on Friday, by the way. Looking forward to that. So, and that was the discussion we were having based on a question from Ben from Madison, talking about extending the tax cuts and wondering why, okay, if we're cutting Medicaid, why are we increasing overall spending? And there's just organic increases because of inflation, Ben. And when we're talking about the discretionary part, remember that's only 26%. And Medicaid, what they're doing there is just what they're allowed to do under the reconciliation rules. You're kind of limited unless you can get 60 votes in the Senate. You know that's not going to happen. Same with Social Security and Medicare. You're very limited. You can't cut interest on the debt because the debt keeps increasing. And that means our interest payments are going to continue to increase, set to eclipse $1 trillion this coming year, bigger than the Department of Defense. Will be the second biggest spending line item behind Social Security this year. So it's just a big $7.3 trillion budget. And then there are those who think we should cut military spending, and there are those who think we should increase it. Generally speaking, the president is for increases. You remember that's one of the first things he did when he was elected for his first term, is he said, and I think the term he used regularly was that his predecessor, Barack Obama, had, quote, decimated the military, and he restored it, and he did. He increased spending on military rather substantially. And so there are a couple of camps within the Republican Party, some that believe we ought to cut it, some that believe we ought to increase it. And that's what it looks like is happening here. So I'll still, again, assert that unless we get serious about Medicare and Social Security, those expenses are going to continue to rise even after we eliminate all the waste, fraud, and abuse for a couple of reasons. One is more people are retiring, and that's increasing the benefit rolls. Second is cost of health care, and health care inflation is still a thing. Now, could we limit Medicare spending to inflation, index it? We should. We should negotiate that. That would force providers to also rein in their costs. Now, I get it. It's for the most part, it's a free market in that the big cost in health care is people, and the shortage of people is driving wages up substantially. And there ain't no doubt, Rhino, that we're still paying the price for the COVID crap when all those salaries and wages were elevated substantially because all the hospitals and the healthcare providers were overwhelmed with sick people, and they were trying to keep their doctors and nurses, and in response, they raised pay. Remember all the traveling nurses and the ridiculous amount of money was being offered by these third-party groups that operate such traveling nurse service organizations, and that was siphoning off lots of employed nurses in the hospitals.
I literally had a friend who, during that time, he's a nurse, he had to leave his wife in one location to travel because if he didn't, he was giving up 3 years' worth of salary.
Wow.
He could make 3 years' worth of his normal salary going on basically a tour of the western United States, working 3 different places, 1 month at a time, and came back having made 3 times his yearly salary.
You can't blame him. So, I mean, it's like one-time opportunity money for a lot of those places. Life-changing it can be. And so,
just imagine how your budget would look if you came home after 90 days and you'd worked your tail off for 90 days, but you had 3 years of your salary in the bank.
So true. And so the point is that kind of stuff doesn't reverse as fast as it accelerates. And we're still dealing with that dynamic in that industry. And what does that mean, the federal budget? Well, when you consider how much of the federal budget is consumed with Medicare, that's approaching $1 trillion a year, Medicaid's $620, and then you got the subsidies and the Obamacare exchanges, and now that's over $100. So when you add all that up, and it keeps rising, all the increases in our spending, the Congress doesn't even touch. Those are on autopilot. Not all, but for the vast majority, overwhelming vast majority. They just happen without any action. And there's no desire to touch any of that. No interest. It's time for Fox News and SuperTalk News because we're at the top of the hour. Jansen Owen.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Jansen Owen. He serves in the Mississippi House of Representatives, represents District 106, which includes Lamar and Pearl River counties. He also serves on the committees. Tell us about the committees. Welcome, first of all, Representative Owen, but we don't have your committee listing. I always like to get that out there. What committees are you serving on?
Thank you for having me. I'm a vice chair of Judiciary B, but also serve on State Affairs, Business and Commerce, Agriculture, and I recently just got off of Transportation.
Okay. All right. So you're busy with all those committees. Now, I just got the notification. Looks like you guys, you gavelled in, then you recessed, subject to recall, then you went back in. Is that right? Did I see that right?
Yep. We just got back on the floor. I'm here in the cloakroom off to the side, zooming in.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. So, tell us about this legislation that you have introduced, and it actually passed the House, I believe, and that is to provide some degree of school choice. We would describe it as open enrollment, public-to-public transfer. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we call it several things: open enrollment, portability, and of course choice. The ultimate goal is to bring more of the choice aspect to parents in Mississippi when it comes to educating their children.
Yeah.
Under current law, if a parent wants to take their child to another public school, that public school, of course, has to accept them. But the wonky thing about our law is that the sending district, the district losing that student, has the ability to veto that parent's decision and say, no, we're holding that kid here. You're staying here. So what this bill does, it does away with that veto power for the sending school district. If the parent wants to leave a school district, that school district can't keep that child there against the parent's wishes. Now, of course, the receiving district gets a lot of leeway in whether or not they want to accept those students. They get to look at capacity, and they get to set their own ground rules as long as they publish them and make sure they're transparent. So we give a lot of flexibility to that receiving district, but this bill really targets those districts that are holding children back and vetoing a parent's decision to send a child to a new school.
And this would not require that the student's home district, the school to which they are assigned based on their address, has a certain grade. Like they don't necessarily have to attend a school that's a D or F district. I believe that's what the Senate was thinking about looking at. I know in my conversations with the lieutenant governor and when we interviewed him, he seemed to be open to that idea. Your bill actually would allow open enrollment regardless, right?
That's right. It's regardless. There are no grades or minimum grading requirements or anything. A parent gets to choose to do it. And people, talk about, why aren't you just limiting it to D and F districts? Well, if you really look at why we're doing this, to bring more choice to parent, like make sure parents are able to dictate more about their children's education. Parents get to consider more than just the grade of a school when they decide where to educate their children. There could be a school that's smaller, and maybe their child would benefit from a smaller classroom, or maybe it's more convenient for the parent to take the child to school every morning because the other district is on the way to that parent's work.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we should limit a parent's choice just to the single consideration of whether or not that school is a D or F school, because parents get to take into account all kinds of factors when making decisions about their children.
Yeah. Okay, so explain the capacity aspect. You mentioned that earlier, and I've read the legislation, and I'll pass on to you that that's the issue that gets the most attention with respect to the receiving school having some sort of discretion and latitude over applicants that they would accept for enrollment. How do we calculate capacity, for example? Is that described in the legislation? How does that work?
No, we leave that really open to the district to be able to report and determine what their capacity is. So we're trying to give as much discretion to these receiving districts because that was a big issue last year.
Yeah.
Was that we were going to be filling up classrooms that are already full. So we're letting the districts make that determination, but of course they have to report their number, but also how they got to the number. They got to report that, and it's got to be published twice a year under my current legislation. I initially wanted 4, but we made some concessions and brought it down to 2. So the hope is that these receiving districts will be really fair in their assessment and determination as to whether or not they're at capacity. And hopefully we don't have to come back in and make any changes ourselves.
Okay, so how then, Representative Owen, how do we prevent the schools from sort of manipulating those figures because they really don't want any transfers?
Well, that is, of course, a concern of mine as well. But again, I'm trying to give the district some leeway, which is why I'm requiring the reporting requirements.
Okay.
And the detailed reporting requirements so that we can monitor and see if that's something that's happening. So I believe I said on the floor, we're giving it to the districts and letting them decide. They have to report it, and hopefully they do the right thing. And if not, then we'll have to come back next year and reel that in a little bit. But I think I can trust my districts right now. If this goes into law, I think they'll be fair. And eventually, I think some of them may be even incentivized to have some open room, because what people forget about is with these children comes money.
Right.
And ultimately, at some point, a school may realize, okay, if we take in 10 more transfer kids, that's a good chunk of change we could take in with them as well, because they'll be getting the state portion, which is about $600 to $800. But under our legislation, we also have a fund we're establishing to cover the local ad valorem rate that school district would be missing out from the parents coming into the district.
And I believe the legislation sets that at $5 million. Is that right?
That is our cap in it, yes, sir.
And so how would a school go about accessing those funds?
So it would actually be the parent would apply to the fund through MDE, and then it would calculate. MDE is able to calculate how much it costs in every district to educate a child. So they'll take that total cost and subtract the state portion from it, and that'll be the amount they get from the fund. Okay.
So it's automatic. I thought perhaps that the school district itself, if they approved a transfer, would have to then, to access the local portion, would have to apply for it, or it would be done through a grant or something like that. So it's automatic then.
It's supposed to follow the child.
Okay. Okay. So, because that's been a concern.
Even in mid-year transfers.
Okay.
Even in mid-year transfers, there was another concern that, like, okay, if a child transfers in November, the school's missing out in that whole year's worth of funding for that child. But we break it up into monthly installments. So schools actually don't get their $600 to $800 for each student at the beginning of the year. They get it on a monthly basis. Okay. So what we do is we just prorate it and send it to the school for the rest of the year.
And I'm digging into this local portion because you know that's an objection you frequently hear, that when a student transfers from one district to another, sure, you guys at the state can make sure the money follows them to the receiving school, but at that point the receiving school is not getting the local portion because the student does not reside in that district. Therefore, they're not paying taxes, the local taxes, to fund their education in that district. And so you've put a separate fund. Bottom line is the state's covering that on behalf of the receiving school. But the transferring school, the home schools, still keeping the local portion, even though they're losing the student, right?
They do. They're keeping the local portion. For a student they're not educating, they do lose that state portion, but they are keeping that local portion. But, a big complaint we hear too is, what are you going to do when all these schools, some of these schools lose all of their students? And I believe I said on the floor, look, if a school has actually lost all of its students, it's probably not very good of a school, and it probably should lose all of its students.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of the point of this legislation is to kind of bring the market into market aspects into public education. If a school's losing a bunch of kids, what are they doing wrong? Maybe the goal is for them to kind of improve on themselves based off of the idea that, okay, if we don't do well, then we're going to lose our kids and we're going to lose our money.
Well, you would expect the natural reaction to be, and this is one of the goals, is that when schools know this is a possibility, that they could lose students and the funding associated with the student from the state, maybe that motivates them a little bit to improve the quality of their output so that nobody wants to leave.
Exactly. What are they doing that makes parents want to leave your district, and maybe they can fix it for themselves?
So. Can you hang around for another segment? We got some other topics we can get to. How you doing? You got to get to the floor.
I'm good. I think Representative Scott is doing an amendment, so I should have time.
Okay, we got Representative Jansen Owen on the line with us. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
With the trouble man, moving, going to town. I come up, getting down. There's only three things that show: taxes, debt, and trouble. This I know, baby.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
And Mick Jones with Foreigner bumping us into this segment. We've got Representative Jansen Owen on the line. We've just been talking about this legislation that survived its test in the House and is over there in the Senate. I believe it's been referred to the Senate Education Committee, chaired by Senator Dennis DeBar. Honestly, Representative Owen, I don't feel like the senator is a big fan of any form of school choice, including open enrollment, public to public.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get that vibe too. But of course, we work well with our Senate colleagues, and I know that over the coming weeks, I have great confidence that he might see some light, and get this bill out of his committee. I know Delbert, the Lieutenant Governor, has voiced at least some support for some form of portability or open enrollment in the past few weeks and just immediately before session. So I'm encouraged by some of that, and I'm encouraged by some of other conversations I've had that it's got a chance to make it at least to fight another day.
Okay. So. While we're still on this topic, another bill that was authored by Representative Rob Robertson, who, of course, chairs education in the House, would expand the charter school program to allow such schools to locate, I believe, in C districts. Right now, they're restricted to D or F districts, and so this would open up more districts for location creation of charter schools. What do you think about that one's chances in the Senate? And how do you feel about that legislation in general, I guess?
Well, I actually authored that bill myself last year.
I remember that.
I've supported our charter schools for a good period of time. Again, it goes back into my principled belief that we've got to give more options to parents and let them make the best choices for their kids. But, the C district expansion is kind of really necessary in light of COVID, how we held a lot of our schools harmless, and then the post-COVID test scores have not really gotten back to normal. So if you look at our D and F districts, there are only like 2 or 3 districts that are even D or Fs right now. So as we wait for those grades to stabilize, it's good for us to continue to expand that in more areas so that we don't, choke out the ability of charter schools to come into the state.
Yeah, makes sense. Not sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm not sure there's quite the level of support in the Senate for that particular measure as there is in the House. But again, I think it makes sense to put it on the table and get the votes on the record. Hopefully it'll come out of committee, and we'll see how folks think about that writ large in the Senate. But we'll just have to wait and see how the process plays out.
Well, look, our process, I've seen this before, you've seen this before. 2 or 3 years ago, there was no chance the Senate had the votes to cut any taxes, and we had a $500 billion tax cut passed. Last year, for most of the session, there was no chance we were going to get rid of MAEP, and we ended up doing that. So, as it goes through the process, votes somehow manage to get on board. So hopefully that'll happen with some of these pieces of legislation.
You're right. It's a great point. Speaking of which, what about HB 1? sweeping tax reform legislation, which cleared the hurdle in the House, is now in the Senate. Of course, the Senate's got their own version. Give us your thoughts.
I wouldn't call it much of a hurdle in the House. We passed it with a pretty big margin.
That's true.
Every single Republican, and I think we even gained some Democrats.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So we support that legislation tremendously. It's been a priority of the House even before Speaker White's administration. Just moving towards eliminating the income tax. I believe I was talking to Chairman Lamar the other day, and he and I both said little parts of our plan that are not perfect, that even we would like to see change potentially. But what we want to do is eliminate the state income tax. That is a priority of the House. It's a priority of the governor, and I think it's a priority for our people to do that. And I don't see us supporting any bill that raises 1 cent of any other tax if we are not eliminating the income tax fully without further legislative action. So I hope that this is just going to be like some of those other bills where the votes weren't there at first, but eventually they came on board. And I think that eliminating the state income tax will be good for our people and good for Mississippi's economy. And I think I have great confidence that our colleagues on the other end of the building will end up seeing that as well.
How would you respond to retired Mississippians who receive little or no benefit, and in some cases, depending on how they spend their disposable income, may even realize a slight tax increase when you consider the increase in the general sales tax and the increase in or the imposition of a new sales tax on fuel? What's your take on that, and how do you respond to that objection?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I still think we're going to, as this bill goes through the process, try to make that burden a little bit less. But the second thing I'll say is those taxes that they're paying, those are voluntary taxes. Those are taxes that they can adjust. They can make adjustments as to what they're doing and what they're spending money on as to paying or not paying those taxes. The income tax is an involuntary tax. Uncle Sam takes that out of my paycheck every week without asking me for permission, and I can't do anything about it. So I would say to those objections, look, why don't we move towards a fairer tax system where you get to control how much you're paying and not the government taking it out of your check involuntarily every week. And that's pretty much the only statement I could have to that. I mean, if we want to move to a consumption-based tax system and get away from the penalty tax that is the tax on work, I think you're going to see where people are going to have to make adjustments to their everyday lives to some extent to spread that out and pay that back into the coffers through the consumption tax.
I thought that in the state of Mississippi, it's somewhat difficult to cut taxes because we already have fairly low taxes, honestly, relatively speaking, and that's true even with respect to the income tax. The legislation that passed in 22 cut the income tax fairly significantly, and there's a lot of folks now whose income doesn't even make them eligible to pay, where they're not subjected to income tax.
That's right.
So at the low end of the scale, they may also see potentially some tax increases, like you say, depending on how they spend their disposable money and how they allocate that across those three categories.
That's right.
That's
right. And people.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go, Jason.
No, I was saying, I mean, there are a lot of people who intentionally don't pay taxes. I know we have. I mean, I always use the example of the drug dealer. The drug dealer in the community, they don't pay taxes. They get their money from underneath they hide their money underneath the mattress, and the government never sees it unless they get busted for drugs. So moving to that consumption-based system, even the drug dealer gets to pay their fair share of taxes, and we're not penalizing these people.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we have a huge so-called underground economy, cash economy, where there's no taxation being applied except when they buy something, when they consume something with it. And they're certainly not paying income taxes. Exactly. And many of them don't even have bank accounts. As you know, we have the least banked state in the country. And that's intentional to avoid any tracking by revenue sources that may say, hey, a lot of money's flowing through your account here, but you're not paying any taxes.
And I didn't realize that until I started practicing law and doing people's estates once they passed away. The number of clients I've had whose dead mama or daddies have had hundreds of thousands of dollars hidden away in some case or basket or Tupperware tub in the attic. It's crazy what people do with their money, but it's just for that reason. They don't want to pay taxes on money they've earned. And I don't necessarily blame them.
Yeah, and therefore they don't have bank accounts for fear that would just expose them and create a bit more of a footprint of their financial affairs, which is true than when you operate in a fully cash environment. And so
that's right.
Increasing the consumption tax, the general sales tax, would in fact sort of pull some taxes from that income that's avoiding income tax is what's happening right now.
That's right. Unless they don't intend to ever buy anything again, they're going to be paying something.
So the Senate,
or at least anything legally.
That's right. So I guess where we stand is the Senate says we're going to reduce the income tax down to 2.99%. And do you think that's a non-starter in the House? You said something earlier that you felt like that even any tax increases that are not accompanied by a full elimination is not something that you feel like your House colleagues would support.
Yeah, we're not going to support that.
Okay.
I can say that pretty confidently. We're not going to support raising the gas tax, excise tax, and not eliminating the income tax.
Okay.
So
Got it.
Confident to say that's not happening.
All right. Got it. Well, the Senate says the same about the House bill, so we'll see, as you say.
Well, we'll see. Maybe we'll meet in the middle somewhere.
That's right. Representative Jansen Owen has been our guest. We appreciate you coming on, Jansen. Really enjoyed it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate it.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Is everybody ready? I'm ready. Ready here. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Are you thinking about retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. You can converse with us on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. So the president's still conducting this cabinet meeting. He's got the big conference table there at the White House, and all of them are assembled along with the key members of his staff. And I've been watching the markets.
That's what happens when you have a president that they're not trying to fit everything into his 15-minute window of cognition.
That's true. And then leaves and says, okay, I got to go. They told me I can't answer any more questions.
All right, don't get my ice cream.
So it is refreshing because he's speaking right now. He's on the television, the live broadcast of the event. He's speaking right now to the room. And that's what you want to see, man, taking the lead. And they're all just homed in on him, consuming every word he says, and will act accordingly. That's exactly what you want.
What was the number I saw earlier this morning that he's answered over 1,000 questions compared to, I think Biden had answered 140 by this point in his presidency?
I've seen those comparisons as well, including Barack Obama along with Biden in the comparison in that statistic. And, yeah, there's no comparison, honestly. Why? I mean, if you run for that office, and you have to be handled such that we can't let you go out there and answer questions or stay at the podium for a little while or engage or interact with reporters or citizens or staff members. You're obviously not qualified for the job. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it.
It's almost like the mainstream media, for as long as you can remember, has been in the bag for the Democrats and not willing to push back on anything they said.
And that's disgusting.
They just accepted anything that came out of the mouth of a Democrat as the gospel truth.
That's disgusting. But I've been watching the markets, and they're up and down, up and down. Now they're in red territory, the Dow is. However, the NASDAQ is still trending in the green. The funny money's down below $90,000 today. It's sitting at $86,000. Take what you will from that. The 10-year Treasury is down. There is some comfort, I think, bond traders and investors overall are taking in the action they're seeing out of the government. That first, it looks like we're inching closer to getting the tax legislation, the Trump tax cuts renewed. They feel pretty good about that. That was a big concern hanging over their head. And then just the mere discussion of rooting out the wasteful spending gives them a little more comfort that, okay, maybe the government's going to do something right here and won't have to go to the well for so much borrowed money. Louis from the 662, regarding our discussion with Representative Owen about school choice, says, I taught for 34 years in Mississippi, and I'll tell you that parents have more of an influence on student success than teachers necessarily do. What can be done to encourage parents to emphasize educational success with their kids, taxes, entitlements? Man, I totally agree, and Rhino's on board with you too, Louis. It's something we talk about all the time. They're documented statistics through detailed, comprehensive review and analysis, evidence-based, for decades that show that children that grow up in dysfunctional homes have a much, much, much more difficult time succeeding as adults in life, including in the classroom during their learning years. Absolutely. There's no substitute for stability in the home. And that often starts with having two parents rearing the kid. That's not to say that a single parent can't succeed. Many do. You guys know that. And it's usually because of enormous sacrifices that single parent makes to take care of their child, not having a partner, a spouse to help. So we totally agree. What can the government do about it? I'm not sure anything. Government. What I would like to see, however, or maybe people whom various communities that seem to have an outsized amount of dysfunctional homes would look up to and respect and heed, and have them deliver that message. This ain't okay. You got to do better. Stop this practice of having babies when you're not married. It just is a recipe for failure, and it's honestly, it's a disservice to the child who doesn't get the nurturing, the love, the stability they need to succeed. Completely agree. Now, we also have something here on the C Spire text line. Let's see where I can find it. Yeah, on the 901. Best I can tell, first-time texter, Rhino. How about asking why the government has a monopoly on education? I'll start with that. We got a series of texts from this listener. Well, they don't. There's nothing that's preventing a private school from forming. We have private schools. 49,000 students in the state of Mississippi attend private schools. So they don't have a monopoly. The money should follow the child, period. Competition, even the threat of competition, will make the government schools better. This is a disgraceful conversation. This isn't school choice. Well, first, we agree. We don't disagree with that. We've been promoters of school choice. We've been on this show. I don't speak for the network. You guys know that. This is an opinion show. But our opinion, and I don't mind sharing, personally, I've been involved with Empower Mississippi since it formed in 2014. And we are the premier school choice advocacy organization in the state. Instrumental in what little school choice we have, getting that done. I've been campaigning for this for 11 years to try to get more than what we have now. So we agree. What the representative has offered is what he believes is possible. I mean, you could put stuff out there all day long, just like Rob Robertson's bill, 1433, which would have allowed public to private transfer. Last year, as you recall, Rhino, there was sweeping legislation that was very similar to what passed in Alabama and Arkansas and Louisiana that would have created universal school choice. Everybody who has a child that's of the K through 12 age, no matter your income or circumstances, would be entitled to the funding allocated by the state for every student. and you could use that money as you see fit to pay for the education setting that you think's best for your child. That didn't pass. Couldn't get that out of the House last year. And then the public to private bill Representative Robertson had this year, a scaled-down version, stopped way short of universal school choice. It didn't make it either. That's the one we were talking to Scott Sands about. So we really have 2 bills left, both out of the House. We'll see what happens in the Senate. Now, honestly, you can't just point to the Senate and say it's all the Senate here, because there's issues in the House as well getting universal school choice through. Couldn't get it through last year. There's issues getting public to private. There are many Republicans in the House that do not support even the public to public, open enrollment, portability legislation. So I think we have to be fair and objective and consider all the aspects of this particular issue. If he believed, this is the texter, what are you saying, he would open this up to home and private schools? Well, I just went through that. Pay attention. I mean, I'm not trying to be arrogant with you here, but we agree. We're tracking it. The fact is, he's open to it. He supported it in the past, such legislation, this particular representative that we had on, Jansen Owen, but the votes don't exist in the House to get that passed. And I can tell you there are many representatives and senators from high-performance school districts that oppose school choice. Their fear is that they would be inundated with students that come from the low-performing school districts, even with capacity restrictions, and that would dilute the quality, overall grade quality of the school, and this is their concern and objection, and that would cause property values to go down, and the overall quality of the education again would be harmed as compared to the current very high-performing, high-quality education being delivered by these districts. These are legitimate concerns. I just believe they could be...
That's not really a legitimate concern. That's like the worst-case scenario.
It is. It's legitimate concerns. Let me add a caveat to it. If it played out that way, if their worst fears were realized, yes, that's a legitimate concern. I have pushed back on that personally, directly, privately. That's really not a problem, especially when you've got capacity restrictions, which is reasonable, which is included in virtually all school choice programs across the country. That's reasonable. That's not in anybody's best interest. But I think what gets discounted is that if we open up the dang charter school program to allow them to locate anywhere, I think you'd see some serious improvement in the poor-performing districts. I think you'd see more choices and options, more charter schools forming, because students would be able to take the money associated with them for their K-12 public school education and direct that to pay for their charter school education, which, by the way, are actually public schools. They fall under the purview of the Department of Education. So this is all possible and reasonable. We just have trouble getting it through. That's right. By the way, this person also said we can't get DEI legislation through. It's Sleepy Joe Part 2. Not true. DEI legislation passed committee and passed the Senate as well, headed to the House.
As we say, it's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays, SuperTalk, Mississippi. So back to this text before I get off of this subject. It's Senate Bill 2515. Remember, Rhino, last week we interviewed Senator Rob Hickman. He opposed this legislation, a Democrat. And I went through the bill and actually read a couple of the provisions, the text of the bill, and asked, do you have any problems with this? And he said, no, I never really could understand why he opposed it. I don't really feel like he gave us good rationale for his opposition. But this bill essentially would eliminate DEI, and it defines DEI. It goes into great explicit detail in defining what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And then it states you can't practice any of these DEI provisions in the higher ed environment, which includes community colleges in Mississippi. I'd like to see it extend to K through 12 as well, but at least this does address that. This passed the Senate, and it has been referred to Judd A. in the House. It was transmitted to the House on February 13th. So that is not true to say we can't get it through committee, because it not only passed committee, it passed the whole dang body in the Senate. So we'll see what happens. I feel confident, honestly, this is going to pass. This is going to be signed by the governor. It's another situation where I feel like we argue so much about what is misinformation and not enough about what are facts. And so the fact is, we did pass such legislation.
Yeah, but if you're belligerently ignorant, you don't really care about the facts. You just want to be belligerently ignorant.
Yeah, it seems like it. The Godfather says, why can't we reduce the number of school districts? The savings would be astronomical. So there was a bill to do just that, and it was to require it all the way down to, it got watered down to, we're going to go study it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of support for that. There are, however, fears. When you talk to people in Madison about combining Canton and Madison County School District, man, oh man, you'll have them down there at the Capitol with pitchforks. In Rankin County, same thing. In Hinds County, and I'm not speaking about every county in the state, just the ones I'm most familiar with here in central Mississippi. The big one, Hinds County, where you got JPS, Hinds County, and Clinton Public Schools, for example. A lot of objection to combining there. Now, there are some places where it's crazy that we have multiple districts in a county that have so few students. No doubt. So I think we could be creative beyond just let's mandate one per county. There would be some savings. I would tell you, Godfather, that it's not prudent to just assume that, hey, we got two back office administrative district organizations. We're going to combine the districts so all of this one can go and we're just left with that one. That's a bit naive, honestly. That's not going to happen, and that would not just totally eliminate all the expense associated with one and just expect the remaining one just to take up the slack and be responsible for everything the other one was doing. In some small districts, I believe that is true, honestly. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they have capacity, that you could, in fact, achieve that. Now, the savings would be a whole lot less as well because of the size of the district and the back office. I know, Godfather, they have one district, but go look at the expenses in that one district. It's gigantic. So
it's not even that. It's look at how that district was founded compared to how districts in Mississippi
He's talking about
founded.
Houston, Texas, just so our audience would know.
Yeah, like he says Houston, Texas has one school district that has more students than the entire state of Mississippi.
Right.
Because it was built that way.
Right. And it
they're
has
not having to tear down the structure or remodel the structure. They simply grew as it grew.
It's still a gigantic back office. It's not like there's any huge amount of savings because they'd only have one and don't have it shot. I mean, you can make the same argument, could you not, about municipalities and counties? I mean, you could go states. Why don't we just have one country instead of 50 states? Think about all the duplication. You also lose the local governance. Got to consider that. If you start combining districts and you got two districts that are adjacent, for example, and one has a completely different philosophy and approach to education than the other, which one wins out? You could actually harm the better performing district in that particular case because the lower performing district or one that has just different approach and strategy now has a voice in the governance and imposes their will. And that hurts. So that's not to say there's not something creative we could do here. I get it. I'm for that. I just would caution you that it doesn't represent exactly the amount of savings that you think it might. It certainly would produce some savings, and therefore we ought to do it. And there are some districts that we don't need and ought to be combined with others. There ain't no doubt. I'll see. They don't want to crack the baby thugs in some schools as their suburbs, blah, blah, blah. Same with school choice consolidation. I'm not sure exactly what they're saying there. Thomas says he thinks the reason that members of the legislature oppose school choice is because they have relatives working in the district. So I've asked him to provide the list, the names of those. Because I can tell you, I know the people that oppose it that are Republicans. They don't have any relatives working in the school district. It's just untrue. We're coming right back with Dr. Carr McClain and Sherry Owings. We're going to talk about Kratom.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio on this Hump Day. We're pleased to welcome now Dr. Carr McClain, a cardiovascular surgeon at Forest General Hospital, and we will be joined momentarily by Sherry Owings. So, Dr. McClain, we wanted to have you on to talk about this stuff called Kratom. I don't know that a lot of people, I was at breakfast with a bunch of folks this morning, and most people aren't familiar with us. Tell us about this substance and its application and use.
So Kratom is a naturally occurring plant. It's native to Southeast Asia. It has been used there for decades, even centuries, by hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. Kratom is related, the plant is related to the coffee plant. And one of its widest uses in Southeast Asia forever has been in low doses as a pick-me-up to help people get through a workday.
Huh.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
At somewhat higher doses, it has a lot of applications essentially as a folk remedy. It has for years for pain and for various GI maladies. Kratom has become more popular in America relatively recently. And as you said, a lot of people in this country have no idea what it is. Unfortunately, that hasn't prevented governments all over the place from simply knee-jerk outlawing it. The most common use for Kratom in America is that people use it as either an alternative to opioid pain medicine or as a drug that helps them get off of opioid addiction.
Okay.
So this is a drug that lessens harm to a far greater extent than it does any harm. Kratom is not like heroin or fentanyl or like any other narcotic in the way it works. Kratom does not fully activate the receptor in your brain that depresses respirations, which is the cause of opioid overdoses. Nobody dies from a Kratom overdose. There is not a single reported death from a Kratom overdose in over 100 years of reporting in Southeast Asia.
Interesting. So you shared before we went on the air that you've been down at the Capitol this morning.
Yes.
And so what's that all about? Are you looking to promote some sort of legislation that perhaps would loosen the restrictions on this product?
Loosen? No, actually. So At the moment, Kratom really isn't regulated at all. And you can go into a gas station and just buy it.
Okay.
And what you buy at least is manufactured by a company with a name and you know what you're getting. But the issue now is that governments all over the country are trying to figure out what to do with this drug. And the government here is one of them. A number of counties in Mississippi went ahead and outlawed it. The state government is now looking at different bills and has looked at different bills to try to bring some uniformity into the way that Kratom is regulated in this state. And, you know, our first, when I say our, I mean people like me who are against the drug war, but our first goal was certainly to try to dissuade them from banning the drug and sending it to the black market where it would truly become a harmful substance. The bill in question in the legislature right now that we're actually advocating for is one that would essentially treat kratom like alcohol and cigarettes. That it would make the buying age 21. It would put it behind the counter in stores. It would allow adults to have access to this to use as they wish and would not allow kids to buy it. We're not asking anybody to reinvent the wheel. We're asking them to treat this herbal supplement the way we treat essentially coffee, alcohol, and cigarettes.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, a minor could purchase this product over the counter today.
Today,
right?
That's the problem.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're advocating for legislation that would, I guess, restrict it more in line, as you said, with alcohol and tobacco.
Yeah, we'd like to see free adult use, not kids.
Okay. So are there objections to that? I can't imagine why there would be.
Because an awful lot of people have been fed a lot of misinformation about the nature of this drug. Another doctor was on last week, not on this show, but in an article in one of the papers last week, claiming that kratom is the next phase of the fentanyl epidemic. That's just outrageous. The drugs are far different from each other, and it's that kind of misinformation that I think has led, again, a knee-jerk reaction in a lot of places to simply ban this.
Okay.
It's a drug. Some kids might get it at a gas station. Well, gee, let's just make it illegal. That'll fix it.
So is that what our legislature's considering? Is total ban?
They right now have stepped away from that.
Okay.
I desperately hope that it'll stay that way.
Okay. Well, I want to bring in Sherry Owings. She is a Kratom user. Hey, Sherry, thanks for coming in. Get a little closer there. Yeah, you're good. So how long have you been using this substance?
7 years, 2 months.
And for what purpose?
Well, I got it. My husband bought it for me for pain because I've had pain all my life. I've got scoliosis. I've been some wrecks and got some bad nerve damage. I've got 6 bulging discs in my neck. So I'm just a lifetime of pain. For over 30 years, I took pain medication every day of my life. Every 4 hours, I had to take my pain medication or I'd be back in severe pain. In 2011, the FDA was cracking down so bad during that time that my doctor had to cut my pain medication by 85%. And even cut my Valium that I'd been on since I was 18 years old. I couldn't even get that anymore. Around the same month, my daddy had a real bad stroke, and he became my child that day. I'm only child, so I had to take care of him, and my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's 6 months earlier. So I had to take care of both of them. Doing that, it was very stressful, just a lot on me. They were both living in my home, solely depending on me. So during the day I had my 2 little pain tablets I could take, but at night I was still hurting, just terrible panic attacks, terrible because my Valiums were gone. So I started drinking wine at night, self-medicating. Quickly that moved into vodka because it was quicker. By the age, I'll be 62 next week. By the age 47, I've become a full-blown alcoholic, never even been a drinker. So further on down the line, 7 years I drank with my daddy in my house. He ended up having another stroke, and I had to move him to a nursing home. I come into a deep depression because I felt like I was a failure. My husband, and I wanted to quit drinking. I checked myself into rehab after my dad left. I went to rehab 3 times in 2017. Every time I got back out, they took all my pain medications. By then I couldn't get anything because I'd told that I was drinking. So I was just left with the alcohol, and it's all over the place. But my husband found Kratom online December and bought it for me. So it came in the mail December the 26th, and after Christmas, and I took it. Within 30 minutes, my pain had just melted away. And I wasn't groggy like a pain pill would do me. When it come time for my drink that day, I had a set time because I was trying to quit. Before my shake started and everything, it was time for my drink. I didn't want it. I wasn't shaking. So I took some more Kratom instead of them. I'd never had no more withdrawals. It took my shakes away. It just totally changed my life. After that day, I stopped craving alcohol. My withdrawals were gone. And it helped my pain. It helps clear my mind. It totally changed my life.
So,
I'm off of all medications now.
So you feel like that Kratom essentially replaced these other drugs like Valium and opioids as well, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, which are highly addictive, right? And could be a problem. And still as effective in controlling and mitigating pain, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. It's better. For me, it's better. I can do more things now just with Kratom that I could not do taking the pain medication.
And it also caused you to rely less and, I guess, to have less of an urge to consume alcohol.
Right.
Is that true?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. I was trying a whole year. I tried a whole year to quit. Like I said, I went in and out of rehab. I mean, I was really, really trying, but the withdrawals were so bad and the craving for it.
Gotcha.
But
we got a break right now, but you guys can hang on. We'll come back for another segment and continue this. I wanted to ask you, Dr. McClain, on the other side of the break, if Sherry's situation is typical, if the same sort of results you have seen, the medical community has witnessed, for example, with the use of Kratom to fight pain and maybe deal with some other ailments or addictions as well. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio. Stay with us.
At Watkins. Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're live in the Element Well studio with Dr. Carr McClain, Cardiovascular Surgeon, Forest General Hospital, and Sherry Owings, a Kratom user. So I was just asking you before we went to break, wanted to think about this and get your response to this, I should say. Dr. McClain, is Sherry described her story. It sounds like this substance, supplement as you call it, I guess, is working out well for her to control her pain and helped her with her alcoholism or her craving for alcohol on a daily basis. Is that a typical situation? Is this an application for Kratom? And have you seen other pain patients, for example, that have adopted Kratom and are utilizing Kratom to treat their pain and deal with these other issues?
Personally, I have not, but that's the nature of my subspecialty. But here's the important point about Sherry. Sherry's experience with Kratom should be between her and her doctor. And Kratom is essentially an herbal remedy at this point. This is not something that the medical community has rigorously researched up and down. This is not a drug that would be fit for prescriptions right now or anything like that. But there are thousands of people like Sherry that have had that experience. And the point to be made is that is between Sherry and her physician, is who it should be. The cops and the state and the government have no business practicing medicine. And whether or not Kratom ever becomes something that is prescribed or becomes a formal part of the medical arsenal, the way that I prescribe pain medicine after I operate on somebody, time will tell. But none of that is a reason to outlaw it and to take that option away from adults. Kratom ought to be Sherry's choice, not mine, not the government's. And any issues that she has with it should be between her and her physician.
Sherry, if someone approached you that knew you were taking Kratom and had similar issues that you do, similar ailments, pain, maybe the pain caused them to consume more alcohol, and that was causing a problem for them, both physically or even just socially or productively. Would you recommend to them Kratom as perhaps an option, an alternative?
I have, actually. I've got family members. We've got a lot of alcoholics in my family. I have actually gotten people sober, introducing them to Kratom. I've got two of my family members now. They're older like me, and they take it for their pain, and they can work now, still be able to work.
Yeah.
Instead of, having to go get pain pills.
Is there some sort of high associated with the Kratom?
I don't get a high off of it. I might get like a boost, like a cup of coffee.
Okay.
A little stimulant.
Yeah.
But as far as groggy, I do not.
Does it cause the same sort of effect, I guess, that consuming a lot of alcohol would, that the buzzing effect and stuff?
No, absolutely. That's one thing I like about it.
Okay. Do you drive?
Yeah.
Does it not impair your ability to drive?
Not at all.
Okay. Should there be, Dr. McClain, any restrictions on operating a motor vehicle the same way we restrict doing so if you've consumed alcohol within a certain period or have a certain blood alcohol content? Should there be some sort of regulations on that?
There's not enough data on it for me to tell you that one way or another. That's honestly research that should be done.
Okay.
I think now that this drug is becoming more and more popular in America, I mean, one of the other things that we don't really know and should learn for the benefit of patients is, are there interactions between this drug and other drugs? Sure. There's plenty to learn about this substance, but if you just think about every other drug that Sherry just mentioned, whether it's opiates or alcohol or Valium, the danger profile and the harm profile of this substance does not appear to come close to any of those.
Okay. Well, because I think it's an honest and objective question. I'm with you that the government shouldn't be between a patient, a person, and their well-being if there's some sort of substance that could improve that. I mean, that's the same argument you could make for medicinal use of marijuana as well. But on the other hand, if operating a vehicle, as an example, that's probably the most prevalent example I could think of. If that could impair their ability to do so, such that they're causing a risk to others on the streets, that's something we ought to at least consider regulating, if not regulate, if we have data to prove that's the case.
Well,
but you make a great point. A lot of these other medications, you would want to drive a vehicle after you take some of that stuff, pain medication.
Well, we have very clear evidence about what happens when you drive a vehicle when you have too much alcohol on board or too much Valium on board.
That's right.
The number of Kratom users in this country is probably over 2 million, and maybe even more than that. Personally, I'm unaware of, a blizzard of car accidents related to
fair
this.
Enough.
That's all I can say.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Anything else, I'm reaching, and I will not do that. But I don't disagree with you that this is the kind of information that we should get about this drug.
Okay.
And every bit of that can be done keeping it legal and accessible to adults who want to use it.
What would you do, Sherry, if the state of Mississippi completely banned this product?
Well, we're not going to let them do that. My county did actually ban for 13 months, and I was a criminal in my own home. I still took
just for simply possessing it and using it, right? Okay.
Yes. I could go to town and buy it, but to come back in my county where I live, it was illegal.
Okay.
And that hurt me. I couldn't get it mailed to me or anything, but I would have gotten in trouble. But I did continue using it because I was not going to go back to the pain pills or the alcohol. I found my life, and that's what I was going to do.
What about the cost? Is this less costly than
yes.
the pain medication?
I might spend $100 every 3 months.
$30 a month, roughly.
That's it.
Okay. Because pain medication, depending on your insurance coverage and so forth, that can be a bit expensive.
And my health is so much better. I do get my doctor knows.
Okay.
I'm straight up with my doctor.
Okay.
And I've lost about 150 pounds since I started. I've just got my health back. I'm not all toxic.
Feel better?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel better. I would never want to go back down to, I never wanted to be on pain medication all my life because I just didn't. Nobody does. I mean, nobody does.
Dr. McClain, are there not just a large volume of reports and studies and analyses and investigations that have in fact proven that this pain addiction has been a big problem? Addiction to pain medicine has been a big problem in America.
It's the worst problem in America, arguably. And if you look at the evolution of things over the last 12 or 14 years, and Sherry is Exhibit A, the government became concerned with prescription opioids and decided that the solution to that was to prevent doctors from practicing medicine and to tell them how many opioids they could give to people like Sherry. So then Sherry loses her prescription opioids. Well, then what happens? A desperate person who's dependent on pain medicine is going to go out on the street and find them. And they found them increasingly in the form of heroin. And so then heroin started killing people instead of OxyContin. And the government then rinsed and repeated. And the more they came down on heroin, then fentanyl appeared. Fentanyl is about 200 times more powerful than heroin. The next round of substances that are 50, 100 times more powerful than fentanyl are already appearing, because that's what happens that's what happens with prohibition of anything.
What's the downside? What's the physiological, the medical, the clinical downside of ingesting this product?
Kratom?
What are the risks?
Dependence.
Okay. What about side effects? Harm to your body in some other fashion?
Really no great data that it causes massive harm.
Okay.
In any way. And, I mean, an increasing number of people like Sherry have been using this stuff for a while, and they're not showing up in hospitals with, liver problems or lung problems or anything like that. So, again, Tom's going to tell on that.
Gotcha. Dr. Carr McClain, cardiovascular surgeon, Forest General Hospital. Sherry Owings, also a Kratom user, talking about how it's affected her life. Appreciate you guys coming on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Well studio.
Is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Ready here. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. A little Baba O'Reilly, hadn't heard that one in a while, by The Who. All I can think about is Peter Townshend busting that guitar up into a billion pieces. What happened to those bands? We don't have them anymore, the show bands like that, huh?
Not really, at least not in American pop music. You get over in Asia, they love them some bands, but here in America it seems like we're more about the solo artist.
I guess you're right, and it's hard to say that the rap artists groups. It's kind of hard to describe them as bands in my view.
I mean, most of them are solo artists. In rap and hip-hop, there tends to be more crossover with featured artists. But, yeah, as far as a set group of people performing individual instruments, it's not a rarity because it still exists. I mean, that's still a huge part of music, but it's just not what rises to the top of the charts anymore.
Well, to your point, a rap artist, for example, you're not going to know who's playing the electronic instruments in the background.
Usually not, no.
The synthesizers and stuff. And
I mean, there are some rap artists and hip-hop artists that are known for being the producer of their own beats or their own melodies, and that's kind of their thing. But, yeah, they're few and far between.
Yeah. Oh, well. Shoot. Whew. So, lots of questions. And comments on the C Spire text line. I think you guys came up with a new word that I like. Belligerent plus ignorance equal belligerence. I'm going to stop dropping that one on some friends. That's total belligerence. From Daleville, Mississippi. That's pretty good. Oh, boy. Let's see here. She just traded one drug for another, says Harbin Surveying LLC. Well, I hear you, but I would encourage you to consider this. The other drug she was taking, perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. Does require a prescription, and maybe there needs to be more study on this, but it's hard for me to stand in the way of somebody who could have access to some substance that could improve the quality of their life. Now, I'm sure that every outcome isn't positive with this, but I don't know how much you could attribute that to the substance itself. Is any certain amount of kratom considered too much of a dose? Well, that's a good question, and I'm honestly not sure, but based on what the doctor said, it doesn't appear, and the user doesn't appear that it creates any sort of high or euphoria or grogginess and all those sorts of effects. I mean, Rhino, you could take too much Tylenol, right? And hadn't there been court cases on that? I think I may have told you before. I have a friend. He's retired now. Was a pediatric gastroenterologist. Did I say that right? I'm not sure. Sounds
right.
Yeah. And I remember years ago, we used to play golf a lot together, and he talking about testifying in these Tylenol cases because, you know, a lot of that would harm the intestines of a child. And, of course, what he said was, well, yeah, when you take 20 in a day and you're 6 years old, that's probably going to cause some damage to the body.
And that usually happened one of two ways. Either it was self-administration by the child, where the parent is either not aware of the child's illness and the child is trying to help themselves through repeating something they've taken in the past. Like, oh, my head feels funny. Last time my head felt funny, Mom gave me this.
Yeah.
Not understanding the dosage. So that's one way it happens. The other is there's a shockingly, I wouldn't say large, but present percentage of the population that sincerely believes, well, if one's good, two's better, and completely doesn't understand dosage units or milligrams or any measurement of medication. So you wind up with, oh, it's a real bad headache. Here's 10 Tylenol. It's like that's too many for an adult, let alone a kid.
That's a good point. And the only point I'm trying to make is, and I'm not trying to downplay the point made here on the text line that about there being some appropriate dosage level. I'm just making the point that there's stuff you can get over the counter, right, all day long, that if you take too much of, it's going to hurt you. It's not good for you. And it kind of reminds me of the old McDonald's hot coffee case. Remember that? Similar sort of deal. Well, yeah, the coffee's hot. If you just throw it on your tongue without testing its temperature, it might harm your tongue, burn the skin, etc. Let's see. Jimmy from Enid, yes. I totally agree that it should be left up to the doctor and their patients, not the government. And then right behind that, Rhino, someone on our text line that says, I've been a SuperTalk listener for the better part of 10 years. We appreciate that, by the way. These last two segments have been hands down the worst I've ever listened to. You know, I would just say that we are here to inform.
I've been doing this longer than 10 years, and I can tell you that was definitely not the two worst segments we've ever had in that time.
I could think of some that I've done where I didn't perform well, and I would call that. I've left this place before and said, I really didn't do very good today. I'm pretty harsh on myself, self-grading. We all are, of course, because your work in this line of work, as you know, is exposed to a whole bunch of people. Imagine 100,000 people standing over you while you're working. That's what
nitpicking how you put the staple in the stack of papers.
That's kind of what this job is, and that's fine. It's no big deal to me. But I'm sorry you felt that way. I thought they were good segments personally, and I thought they were very informative. I learned a lot about this with respect to the doctor and the user coming in on the program. This person also said, why does the conservative Republican state Senate and conservative Republican state House of Representatives have such a different view on the issues? And that's something we've actually addressed before. I'll put it this way, just to kind of, without going through a 30-minute explanation of that, which is about what it takes. Define conservative. And I'm not trying to be flippant or arrogant. What I'm trying to say is because there's no consensus. So I'll give you an example with respect to school choice. There are conservatives that would say, well, allowing a student to move between schools could, with this portability or using public money for private education, that's not conservative because it strips money away from the public school, or it perhaps harms one and benefits another, and that's not. They would tell you that's not conservative. And the next person would say, no, that's kind of the definition of freedom. So how do we get those guys to meet together? Tax reform. You've got one group that says the conservative approach here is to completely eliminate the income tax. The conservatives believe that taxing consumption is more effective and efficient and more conservative. However, those same people, when you tell them, yeah, okay, we're going to increase the consumption tax so that we can have sufficient funding to operate the government in eliminating the income tax, would say, well, that's not conservative. And then you got other people that say, well, when you strip so much revenue away from the state that it can't meet its services obligations, that's not conservative. The only point I'm trying to make is there's no consensus of what conservative is. There's no consensus of what progressive or liberal is anymore. You got lots of liberals in this country now that have said, I'm not for
dudes in dresses
playing in female sports, right? And even Stephen A. Smith, as we talked about yesterday, Bill Mayer saying, keep doing that, you're going to keep losing. Yet they would fashion themselves as liberal, just as an example where they depart on that particular issue. It's hard to get consensus. It's hard. Negotiating the tax bill in Washington, you've got factions that say, we need to increase the SALT, state and local tax deduction, which only affects the rich people and the middle class in the deep blue tax states, and you got others that say, well, no, that doesn't affect my state. We need to cut income taxes in lieu of that policy. As you can see how complicated and nuanced it gets. Said I'm still a very proud listener, and we appreciate that. So I'm sorry you didn't like the segments. Again, we just thought it makes sense to have those folks on to talk about this matter because there's legislation being discussed right now. And you can see, just like I said earlier, there's no consensus. Rhino, you see it back-to-back text. One person says, yes, great, government, get out. The next person says, worst segments I ever heard. I would probably venture to say that both of these people would consider themselves conservative. This makes my point right there. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
we ran a...
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
To the town of Opry rode a stranger one fine day. Hardly spoke to folks around him, didn't have too much to say.
The great Marty Robbins.
To ask his business,
the person, CC in Senatobia said, the person who didn't like the last two segments is just having a bad day, might need a Kratom. And I think I said it, but they did send us a text, said still a proud listener, and we appreciate that. And look, we understand that. Every segment and every guest and everything we talk about is not going to be liked by everybody. But, Rhino, you know, I've said this before, and like you said earlier, you've been doing this a lot longer than me, but when I first started doing this, I think I've shared this with the audience before, management here said, Gerard, you got to have an opinion, right? This is what this is, an opinion show. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just our opinion. Some people agree with it. Some people don't. I'm quite sure we may not universally agree with your opinions. But you know what? That's what makes this such a great country. And what I think and I hope we can all agree on is that right needs to be protected. End of story. Right there. You have the right to express your opinions. That's just period. And what we've seen in this country is a movement by the left to censor opinion. You've seen it with parents going to school board meetings. Sit down, sit down. But I don't want my kindergartner to learn radical gender ideology crap, sexual identity nonsense. Sit down, you're out of order. That's what we got to guard against.
You can't read that in these proceedings. It's obscene. Then why the heck is it in the library for the kids to check out?
And that's what we expose here and we fight against. That we can all agree on. They obviously that school board member and that interfered or interrupted or tried to gavel down the parent didn't agree. But you know what? In my view, the parent has the right to address their elected school board where their kids attend and where they pay taxes for them to go. That's ridiculous, which is why we need a universal Parents' Bill of Rights. And that simply means you have the right to know what your kids are being taught in the classroom. You have a right to direct the affairs, including the educational affairs of your kids. You have a right to see where the money's going. You could go down the list. But
that encroaches on the little personal fiefdoms of government-funded administrators.
And that's what's got to end. John in Hardeman, Tennessee says, I've taken Kratom and it does work on pain. Now, I'll tell you guys on the break, just for the heck of it, I went out and did a search. Just a quick, search on pros and cons. And there's no consensus, just like on political. Right? I mean, am I right? There's no consensus. No consensus. No, you shouldn't do that. Yes, you should. No, this was terrible. It ruined me. Yes, this was great. It helped me. So I'm not exactly sure how to even take a position.
Welcome to the world of herbal supplements. You can put it in the same boat as ginkgo biloba.
Seems like
it. Makes some people feel like their memory works well, and others are like, this is just a really expensive urine pill.
That's exactly right. On the 662 on the C-Spire text line, ads for California psychics?
Miss Cleo was Jamaican.
William and Brandon says, I've been a SuperTalk guy since before JT and Dave were on in the morning, switched to afternoon, which didn't work out well at all. Then back to morning, showing my age here. We appreciate you too, William. Really do. So, and that's the other thing, Rhino. Every now and then we just have to revisit, which is this is a business. This is first and foremost an enterprise, a for-profit enterprise. And the main revenue source is advertising.
Which is why we spend so much time trying to have educated opinions instead of just being belligerently ignorant and just spouting opinions that make no sense and really anger people for no good reason.
Man,
I like angering people for good reasons, but if you just tick them off for no good reason, it's just a waste of time and energy.
On the C-Spire text line, in Alcoholics Anonymous rooms, one is too many and 1,000 never enough. I've been listening to SuperTalk for 20 years, and those segments are great. Appreciate that. Thomas says, by the way, he still believes that the reason there are some Republicans that oppose school choice is because they have relatives working in the public school system. I'm not buying it. I can tell you, I know all the reps in Madison and Rankin County and where they stand on this. I don't think a single one of them have a relative working in the public school system. And if they do, I can assure you they don't oppose this for that reason. They oppose it because they get blown up by constituents in the respective districts that are worried about students invading their schools from the other districts. Period. End of story. And one that I know of in my county voted for school choice legislation, and he absolutely got castigated by some people as a result of it in his county, in his constituency, because he voted for education freedom. So I'm not buying that whatsoever. And it's beyond just property values, Thomas. All you got to do is look at the flyer produced by the Madison County Schools where I live. You recall, Rhino, I read it here on the program. I thought it was totally inappropriate and misguided and inaccurate, but they still put it out by the school board, produced and issued by the school board, in showing their opposition to all forms of school choice, honestly. We're going to continue with that discussion, of course. It's a big deal. Woo! Jim in the Delta sent us a text. I'll get to it tomorrow, Jim. I'm going to copy it down. We're out of here today. Back with you again tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.